A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. Like, it's the men that have the most aggressive and fearless temperaments that can be the best men. But it's like having a very powerful dog. You better discipline it, because otherwise it's going to be a monster. If the hero archetype is the central male story, there are variants of hero archetypes that are relevant to women, and one of them is Beauty and the Beast. And Beauty isn't interested in the guy who isn't the beast. She's interested in the guy who's the beast, and that's exactly right, but she's interested in the guy who's the beast that can be civilized and disciplined, right, and who can use that in the service, well, let's say, of a family. And that's exactly how it should be. You don't make men safe by making them weak. In fact, they're much more dangerous when they're weak, because they'll stab you in the back when they get the chance, or take advantage of you when they get the chance. You make men safe, let's say, by making them strong, and then by making sure that they're disciplined. And you see this with Harry Potter, for example, which I'm making reference to because it was such a phenomenon. I mean, when something makes a welfare mother richer than the Queen of England, you shouldn't take note, right? And when kids are reading 500-page books and standing in line waiting for the next one, and when you produce a whole movie empire around something, you should take note of that. Well, Harry Potter's little team aren't the delinquents, right, who have no discipline, but they're also not the good kids. They're the kids who will break rules when necessary, and that's the issue. Break rules when necessary. Now, the question is, when is that necessary? Well, that's sort of the ultimate ethical choice. And again, in the Harry Potter stories, you see he's touched by evil, right? He actually has a soul fragment that's embedded within him that's as black as anything can possibly be. That's why he can talk to snakes. But without that, he wouldn't be able to have any victory. And that's exactly right psychologically. Unless you can think the way that an evil person thinks, then you're defenseless against them, because they'll go places you can't imagine, and then they win. Well, here's an example. So about 20 years ago, I would say, there was a newspaper headline in one of Canada's major newspapers, and it was the Minister of Foreign Affairs at that time, Lloyd Axworthy, and he was talking about what had happened with Milosevic in the former Soviet Union in Yugoslavia, and the atrocities that were being committed. And he said that he was caught unawares by that because he didn't have the imagination for that kind of evil. And I thought, well, you think that what you're doing is signaling your virtue by making a statement like that, but from my perspective, all you're doing is stating your cowardice and your historical ignorance, because if you're going to be Minister of Foreign Affairs, you bloody well better have imagination for that kind of evil, because if you don't, then anyone who does wins. They beat you. And this is part of the reason that I'm an admirer of Carl Jung, because Jung makes it very clear that, see, he was very interested in the barriers to enlightenment. Because if there's such a thing as being enlightened, let's say, then why isn't everyone enlightened? If it's just a matter of taking the glorious route and following your bliss, let's say, it's like, well, that sounds pretty easy. Why isn't everyone enlightened? But Jung's thinking isn't like that at all. He believed that in order to transform your personality, that first of all you had to be disciplined, that's for sure, but you also had to integrate that part of you that was terrible.
How is it good to be dangerous?
Because it makes you formidable. And life is a very difficult process, and you're not prepared for it unless you have the capacity to be dangerous. That doesn't mean that you should be cruel. It doesn't mean any of that. There's a statement in the New Testament, the meek shall inherit the earth. But the meek isn't well translated. It means something more like those who have swords and know how to use them but keep them sheathed will inherit the world. That's a way better way of thinking about it. You have to be powerful and formidable and then peaceful, in that order, right? And that's not the same as being naive and weak and harmless, which is what young men are being encouraged to be. It's like, that's a very bad idea. It's a very bad idea, because naive, weak, and harmless means that you can't withstand the tragedies of life. You can't bear any responsibility. You'll end up bitter, and when you get bitter, then you get dangerous.
But one thing I'm not getting, by dangerous, that implies I should be ready to threaten someone, to hurt somebody.
No, you should be capable of it. but that doesn't mean you should use it. There's nothing to you otherwise. Like if you're not a formidable force, there's no morality in your self-control. If you're incapable of violence, not being violent isn't a virtue. People who teach martial arts know this full well, right? If you learn a martial art, you learn to be dangerous, but simultaneously you learn to control it. Both of those come together. And the combination of that capacity for danger and the capacity for control is what brings about the virtue. Otherwise you confuse weakness with moral virtue. I'm harmless, therefore I'm good. It's like, no, that isn't how it works. That isn't how it works at all. If you're harmless, you're just weak. And if you're weak, you're not going to be good. You can't be, because it takes strength to be good. It's very difficult to be good.